Not long ago, a trio of American boutique trail bikes would have set the alarm bells ringing in terms of handling. That's because smaller boutique US brands have been slow to adopt what's now widely known as modern trail bike geometry. Typically they used to have shorter top tubes, steeper head angles and sky-high bottom brackets. Times are changing though, and our friends across the pond have got the memo that slacker, lower and longer doesn't necessarily translate into a dull ride. In fact, the 3 trail bikes here, all from rider-owned US brands, have up-to-date numbers and are primed for the kind of aggressive trail riding that's really popular here in the UK. The 140mm Travel Mach 5.5 is Pivot's latest trail machine. It sports a high modulus, full carbon frame, and the resulting bike looks absolutely stunning. Both halves of the carbon frame are united by Dave Weagle's DW Link suspension design. This uses 2 short rotating links to tune the chain forces, axle path and the way the suspension balances rider weight shifts. It pumps out 140mm of travel, but it still has all the pedalling efficiency of an XC bike. One design addition that won't be everyone's favourite though is the Press Fit BB. That said, we experienced 0 creaking with it during the test. You get Kashima coated Fox suspension, including the latest 160mm Travel Float 36 fork with a larger negative air chamber for increased small bump sensitivity. It's the same story with the Evil Shock, and there's a 3-way compression lever within easy reach for fine-tuning the pedal platform. With a generous reach measurement, Pivot's stock stem felt a bit long, and while the 800mm carbon bar was welcome, it was hampered by WTB's quirky padlock grips. Every tester complained about them, but you can't get rid of them without chopping down the mitered handlebar or changing it altogether. Uphill or down, pumping terrain, popping out of turns or pounding over rock and root, nothing seemed to put a dent in the pace of the Pivot. The frame is uber stiff, to the point where it's almost impossible to deflect offline, and combined with the oversized tyres, the bike flutters and chops away at the ground for grip when leant right over. It's ruthlessly efficient too, and this turn of speed sees you sprinting wherever you can sneak in a pedal stroke. What's really cool is that there's little trade-off in terms of flat-out downhill speed or composure. Saying that, the Pivot's slightly taller bottom bracket and sharper suspension means it's not quite as smooth or chuckable as one of the competitors here. There's no denying that the new Pivot Mach 5.5 is a rocket ship. It has incredible XC-like speed and climbing prowess, but it's also super capable on the descents. So even though it's not a shrunken DH bike, it's one of the best trail bikes we've come across for anyone that places pure efficiency above raw downhill speed. Transition is the epitome of a hip, rider-owned bike company. As one of North America's early adopters of long, low and slack geometry, we were surprised to discover that the Scout is over a degree steeper than the Evil and Pivot. With 125mm of travel, it also packs marginally less suspension muscle, but this is less noticeable than the more upright geometry. Outback, the RockShox Monarch shock uses a debonair can with a larger volume negative air spring to help initiate movement, improving traction and comfort. It's super smooth and the rear end feels very plush. Unfortunately, that means the suspension bobs a lot under power, to the point where we are constantly reaching for the 3-position compression lever. On a $5,000 build, the inclusion of a basic RockShox Pike RC fork is a bit disappointing, as it lacks the extra high-speed control of the more expensive RCT3 version. Equally, SRAM's 11-speed GX gears and the Raceface FX cranked are functional but not exactly boutique. Send the Scout on a mission down a rough bit of trail and the rear suspension is really surprising. It handles repeated hits smoothly and massages the ground for grip and comfort way more effectively than it has any right to, considering the travel. The low bottom bracket and short stays make the Scout easy to manual, and the carbon frame is light and chuckable, but it doesn't feel anywhere near as stiff, solid or responsive as the other 2 bikes in this test. That head angle makes the front end more willing to tuck in on steep descents, and it feels smaller and less stable at speed too. So in this company, with this spec, at this price, it's been outclassed in most departments. Evil is so boutique that all of its frames are cut exclusively from unidirectional carbon cloth. The chassis feels solid and precise, but it still conforms to the terrain better than some razor-sharp carbon frames. Asymmetric mounts connect the shock linkage to the swing arm and offer two geometry settings, the lowest of which literally lets you drag your heels through loamy turns. The Dave Weigel designed Delta Link suspension may look complex, but it's actually a deceptively straightforward single pivot with a linkage actuated shock. By moving to a trunnion mount, it now rotates on bearings rather than bushings. As such, grip and control have been improved to such a degree that the back end on the cooling shames many enduro bikes. Up front, the 140mm travel RockShox Pike gets the new Charger 2 damper, and it balances with the rear suspension perfectly. Best of all, it can handle a 2.8-inch front tyre if you want to improve grip and slacken the head angle further. SRAM's GX Eagle 12-speed drivetrain boasts a headline-grabbing 500% gear range, but the real story here is that there's a silky smooth shifting and pedalling experience that's almost identical to the mega expensive X01 version. If you find yourself at the top of the kind of descent you'd normally only consider on an enduro bike, rest assured the cooling totally has your back. The 131mm of suspension is impressive and balanced with so much cornering grip it urges you to push the envelope. It glides along like a hoverboard too, even on really beaten up trails. Pedal clearance is minimal, but it generates addictive cornering grip that's strong enough to peel the knobs right off the tyres. And good suspension support means the cooling never feels wallowy. With less travel but a similar mindset to an enduro rig, the cooling walks the tightrope between lightweight trail bike and all-mountain ripper. Being comfortable and plush is easy, but few bikes remain tight, poppy and agile at the same time, so Evil has managed to pull off the perfect balancing act. Some people say that all bikes are so good nowadays you can just pick the one you like the look of, but we simply don't buy into that. Two of the bikes here prove it's still possible to get ahead of the competition and both excel in completely different ways despite the suspension systems being designed by the same bloke. The Evil cooling and Pivot Mach 5.5 are so damn good, choosing between them boils down to what kind of riding floats your boat. If you like going fast everywhere and want a planted, assured trail weapon, the latest Pivot Mach 5.5 is a hell of a machine that's perfect for everything from all-day epics to aimless hours mucking about in the local woods. While skillful bike handlers will get the absolute best out of the slice and dice Evil. Plus, it's so well balanced and easy to ride, it will plaster a massive grin across your chops before you've got to the end of the first trail.